Hi, I'm Don Portala, and you're listening to Maintaining Sweat Equity, the plight of small business in the wake of COVID. On this week's episode, I speak with Meghan Gardner, the CEO of Guardian Adventures. Guardian Adventures is a creative summer camp that uses science fiction and fantasy roleplay as a means to provide STEM education. I first met Meghan back in 2013 when I was hired by her to create video content for her facility, which at that time was called Guard Up. The direction she gave me was fairly simple. Capture as much footage as I could of happy, smiling faces. May have been one of the easiest jobs I've ever had because I basically just needed to point my camera in the general direction of whatever was going on. Over the course of a few years of producing short videos for Guard Up, I got a first-hand account of the truly positive impact that the camp and its counselors had on these kids, as well as the incredibly imaginative way that they were able to facilitate this. Having known Meghan for some time now, I can say she's a fascinating and deeply kind person. Just for context, when this interview took place last October, she was in the process of getting approved to donate a kidney. Not for a specific friend or family member, mind you, but because, as she educated me, someone dies every 28 minutes waiting for a kidney, and she just happened to have one she could spare. We discussed the state of the camp, which had just shut down its long-standing day facility in Burlington, Massachusetts, as well as the challenges Guardian Adventures was currently still facing. One of my biggest takeaways from this conversation was the insight Meghan provided on how PPP loans that were not initially designed with seasonal businesses in mind really affected an industry like summer camp's ability to sustain themselves. Similar to last week's episode, this interview took place toward the end of last year, so bear that in mind when subjects like government leadership and the COVID vaccine are discussed. With that said, let's hear from Meghan.
I'm Meghan Gardner, CEO of Guardian Adventures, and the businesses that we do educational adventures.
So for anyone who's never attended Guard Up or Guardian Adventures or seen the summer camps, can you briefly describe what the experience is like?
Briefly? Think of a video game, but without the computer. So kids and adults show up to an adventure. The adventure is a story that's ongoing and it changes according to their actions. They play a character. They might be dressed up as a character, and they may be entering into a story that has a specific ethos based in, either wizards and warriors or post-apocalyptic zombie or steampunk sci-fi. And they navigate the adventure with our actors and our special effects, props and set design. Only at our camp, in order to battle the monsters and to power up, you have to actually use STEM. So you learn STEM in order to, say, in the Wizards and Warriors version, in order to cast a spell, you actually have to learn physics because the spells are all based in physics. In order to do alchemy, you have to learn chemistry. If you're going to be a druid or a ranger, you have to learn about environmental sciences. So it's a way to kind of slip real-world education into an entertaining and dynamic story that allows the participants to explore the world as well as what it means to be a hero. And then on top of that, we have an overlay of the stories, which are pulled out of real-world myths and legends and novels. But we try to keep it non-Eurocentric. So, for example, we hire on a cultural educator for an entire year who consults us in what kind of adventures, what kind of stories we're going to be running. So that we can make sure that they are culturally sensitive. This past year was Moroccan stories and legends. And in previous years, we've done Native American with emphasis on Arawak and Abenaki tribes. And we actually hire people from those tribes or from that culture to consult with us. So in addition to getting the STEM, you're also getting exposure to different cultures, stories, and myths. And hopefully in doing so, it can help you, the participant, realize the similarities we have with other stories around the world, even from people who may dress differently and look differently and speak differently. Our stories are all still quite similar and not sometimes the same.
What do you think makes this an effective way to teach kids STEM education?
It's about story. We are wired, human beings are wired for story. We have been since we lived in caves. That's how we passed information on from generation to generation. Stories can, especially stories that emotionally engage us. When we are emotionally engaged, we learn differently. It's stickier. We retain the information better. We're more motivated to understand the concepts, and when we have better understanding, we also have better retention of the lesson. So by integrating new ideas and new cultures as well as STEM into our programs in this dynamic adventure, which, by the way, you have the power to change that story. You can actually, you don't just determine whether or not you personally succeed in the end. You're actually navigating through a story that is adjusted every day according to the actions that you take. So it's kind of like a video game in that sense, except that literally anything is possible. We are sometimes making the props and costumes that night for the story the next day based upon what happened that day at camp.
Can you describe how you discovered this business, how you got started, just a little bit about the genesis of Guard Up or Guardians Adventures?
Yeah. So actually, it started as Guard Up because it was a martial arts facility and fencing and sword fighting, and that was my passion at the time. I had been a martial artist since the age of 12, and I really wanted to be a martial arts instructor, have my own school. But I also loved fencing, which I did in college. And then I went to a LARP, a live action role playing game, because I was also a Dungeons and Dragons nerd. And I experienced what a LARP was, and I saw, everyone running around in the costumes and integrated into the story, and how involved and emotionally engaged everybody was. And I was like, this is amazing. Why isn't this being done for kids? So number one. And number two, I thought it was interesting that here I was learning a fake language and these symbols for alchemy that some wonderful author made up out of their own mind. And I thought, why not instead encourage the participants in the story to bring real world knowledge into the game, into the environment, so that I am inspired by the game to leave the game and go learn more about my world outside the game and bring that into the world and allow it to help me excel in the adventure. So that was really kind of the genesis, along with, it was paired essentially with being a mom. And at that time, my daughters, who are now adults, were very little. And on occasion, I would tell them a bedtime story. Instead of reading them a story, I would make up a story where they were the heroes in the story. And I would present the first part of the story, and then I'd put them in a situation to make a decision, and I'd stop and I'd say, so now what do you do? And then they would tell me, and then I would adapt the story, and we'd keep going. And I realized that this was a very powerful tool for assessing where my kids were in their social development, in their decision-making skills. And sometimes I'd throw educational elements in as well. And they loved those. They loved the interaction. They loved the creativity. They loved being a hero. Who doesn't, especially children? So I realized there is an opportunity to really have an impact, especially with kids, because they have the ability to suspend disbelief immediately. Adults take a little bit more convincing, and teens. But the kids are very quick because they're used to playing pretend. So they get right into the story, and they have that engagement, and they allow it to challenge them and to change them. We specialized in being an unplugged environment and an unplugged camp. When kids showed up for camp, they turned their electronics over to the nurse, and they had to make an appointment to call their parents or anybody else. So they were literally spending the summer with us with no electronics. I know, which is just such a foreign concept right now, right? I know. So here we are specializing, and that was in fact one of our taglines: we unplug kids. And I prided myself in that. I loved that we were getting kids who would normally spend the whole summer doing this in front of a screen, unplugged, and being that hero, practicing what it means to be a hero in this environment where they could experience things and learn things that would actually transcend that environment, that would transfer into their life outside of camp.
So before we reach the challenges that COVID-19 has presented for businesses, what were some of just the normal challenges that you face running a summer camp like this?
I mean, it's hard to even think of them because, you know, you look at what I'm experiencing today and you look at what I was experiencing then, I was like, that was nothing. It's your typical making sure your employees are taken care of, that there's no burnout in the all of the demands, the physical and emotional demands and mental demands of running the summer camp. It's the facilities, you know, the hot water's not working, or we had people walking through our camp, you know, outsiders walking through our camp, or homesickness. So-and-so's been away from their family. They've never been away for this long of time. So it's your typical challenges of running a summer camp or a business that caters to children. We have some behavior challenges we have to work with, but it was all stuff we were experienced in. We knew how to deal with all that. It was almost never a big surprise. There were interesting things that happened and that we were like, okay, you know, but almost everything we had training for, even if it was brand new to us, we had trained for it, or we had already experienced at least some shade of it, so that we had something to draw on. And then we'd come together and we'd discuss how to address it, and we did. And we had a really good team going into this year. And we were prepared for an incredibly successful summer. And we had lined up international clients. Royal Caribbean we had designed adventures, onboard adventures for their ships that were due to roll out and were already showing a lot of success. We had a client in Korea, ST Unitas. We were designing and running, helping to train summer camps for South Korea. Any number of, I had so many larger clients, and as well as just a lot of parents. And we had people, literally we had kids coming in from all over the world to our camps.
So cut to now that we're several months into the pandemic, what are you currently up against?
Losing my business. You know, I've already had to vacate our property and tear down the castle that we built. That was the facing that my oldest daughter, Marin, designed herself. We've had to sell off a bunch of our assets to help support keeping our very few employees. I've gone from 20 year-round employees to 3. As soon as the pandemic hit and they were calling for closure in March, I went on unemployment so that my salary could go to my employees. Wasn't that long after, another executive did the same thing. He kept working for the company, but went on unemployment so that his salary could go to the employees. We did everything we could to stretch it out. We actually were able to pivot rather well to moving all of our programs online. Now, here's the company that specialized in unplugging kids suddenly having to go online. Massive amount of irony right there. And we did it, though. We did it, and we did it well, and we're continuing to do it because we realized we can still do this. We can do this, a version of this, and we can start to tell our stories in an environment that still is face-to-face. So we don't have the video game environment where you're looking at avatars and you're moving characters around. You're still face-to-face with your counselor or instructor, and you're interacting with your friends as you navigate an adventure. But it is wildly different. And because it's different, and because kids are in front of a screen for most of the day for school, the last thing their parents want them to do is be on a screen for their free time and their social time. Even though we point out that a major element that's missing from online school right now is that social time. Because it used to be that in school, when you are in person in school, you're going in between classes and you stop off and you chat with each other. You get into class, you're waiting for people to arrive, you chat with your friends. You have lunch together. That social element was a major part of the community of school, and it's gone. And there's nothing left to fill this void. So we're trying to come in to create something that will help fill that void, which is these adventures that are still educational, but with more of an emphasis on that social outlet, allowing the kids a time to, just chat with each other. And it's like, we'll have kids in the middle of an adventure and some kid's cat jumps up onto the keyboard right in front of them. And normally it'd be like, a teacher would be like, okay, get rid of the cat. But we're all like, oh, a cat. Well, how's the cat work into the story? We work the cat into the story. So, and then all the kids want to know what's your cat's name. And we give the cat a character and the cat has a special role in the story. So we try to do that. We try to integrate anything that happens in that environment into the story to help the kids feel like it's all okay. Whatever you're going to bring to this story, it's okay.
So in the event that you had to go all digital permanently, is that sustainable?
I don't think so. And I don't want to. I could see there being an aspect of our company that stays digital. And we will keep going digital until there's a vaccine that's distributed. But the in-person has elements to it that can't be replicated, not the least of which is the way our instructors interact with this, especially teens and the younger kids. So just as an example, when you're trying to when you have a group of kids and there's one kid who's kind of sitting on the periphery, and you notice that because they're physically positioned on the periphery. And what you can do is you can have one instructor kind of take over the group and you can move over and sit down and chat with that kid and say, while they're still a part of the group and they're within eye line, but you're creating a little space where you can have a discussion with them to hopefully reintegrate them back into the group, but to give them that little extra attention. And with teens, and this is really important with teens, you never sit face to face with a teen when you're discussing this. In fact, you sit side to side so that you can both see what the teen is looking at. And that's how you actually have great discussions with teens, because this is confrontational. And this is, it's just something where you're putting someone on the spot. But when you're allied, when you're right next to, physically next to a teen, you can look at what they're looking at and you can talk about what they're looking at. And then out of that discussion is born what the problem is and what they're feeling and how to address that and hopefully get them back into the experience. And when you have a child or a teen who's in their own physical environment and you're in your own physical environment, and the only thing we have is looking at each other, I have no context to find out what's going on in that environment for them that might be distracting them or bothering them.
What does your business need right now to keep the doors open?
Money. And to keep the doors open, the doors are closed. They're closing at the end of this month. The physical location is done at the end of this month. We are strictly online. And then hopefully, if we manage to tread water through the winter and into this early spring, late winter, early spring, when hopefully there is a vaccine, we will be then looking to try to find a new location. And that will likely be something that we're going to sublet. Maybe I'd like to partner with another small business that's struggling with rent, and we work out a schedule where they have it on these days and we have it on this day, and we share in the rent costs and the utilities. Something like that that would help another small business until we can both get up on our feet and be able to afford the full rent of our own facilities. So it's, the PPP was burned out in 2.5 months because that's what it was designed to do. It was designed to keep you afloat for 2.5 months. That was 6 months ago? So I'm leveraged to the hilt. I've got the small business loan out. I had thankfully had a really good 2019 revenue-wise, and I kept all that money in the company in hopes to buy our own facility. That money's all gone. I have just enough to hopefully open us up a new facility, but the rest of it has just been spent trying to keep our employees. And even with that, we had to do layoffs. At the end of the summer, our seasonal staff left, and so that gave us some relief, but then we had to do first round of layoffs, and then we did a second round of layoffs. And as I said, we're down to 3 employees now, full-time. And we're just trying to make it through to, say, January, February. I don't know. I'm watching the news for a vaccine, and it seems like every other day a vaccine trial is being put on hold because there was a negative reaction to something. So I'm not optimistic that everyone was saying that it was going to come out in December. I don't think so. I think we're going to be in this for a full year. And so it's tough because we're not making enough money to be able to. We're right now, thankfully, I have incredibly creative staff, and they are coming up with ideas to generate enough revenue to just hopefully we can break even. As I said, just tread water between now and the new year. I'm still losing money every month, and it's demoralizing because after the first round of PPP, which was designed for year-round businesses, it was not designed for seasonal businesses. The problem is that with a summer camp, you are annualizing the money out over the whole year. And so you're only going to get 2.5 months of your money spread out over an entire year. That's a problem for summer camps because most of our money and our payroll happens in 2 to 3 months. So if you do that and you spread out, you go 2.5 months of it taken out over the span of it, you're looking at a very small amount of money. So the summer camp industry got together and we all went and contacted our senators and our representatives, and we said, we can't exist on this. So they were like, oh yeah, that would work that way for seasonal businesses. So they went back and they passed a measure to allow seasonal businesses to reforecast and just take those 2.5 to 3 months of payroll and go and pass it on to that and basically make the funds based on that. So I go back to the lender who gave me my PPP and I said, so if we recast it, I should be getting a lot more money. And they're like, we can't do that. I said, what do you mean? It was just passed. They said, yes, but they never passed anything to allow us, the banks, to pull back your forms, redo them, and resubmit them. We cannot resubmit. There was nothing done on the financial end for the logistics to allow a reforecasting. So all that lobbying that the camp industry did to try to get this pushed through was for naught because we can't reforecast.
So when it's politically said that small businesses are the lifeblood of our country, and you see the response, do you feel that the response matches the lip service?
No. And, right now we are in the middle of I'm calling it the great small business die-off. And what kills me is on occasion I'll go online and I'll see on social media all these memes bandied about evil corporations and CEOs making the big buck. And I'm like, my God, I have given up my salary. I've given up my life savings that I put into this company, and I'm a for-profit company. And I'm doing all this to try to keep my staff employed because they matter to me. I don't know if this company is going to survive, but my staff still matter to me. And I think you often have that more in a small business than you do in a large corporation. And it's interesting to me that these memes that are bandied about are about the evils of large corporations. And yet, what is the antidote to large corporations? Small business. So small businesses make up for 48% of the employees. 48%, almost half of the people employed in this country are employed by a small business, according to the Small Business Association. And we have failed in the response. When PPP came out, it was snapped up by so many large corporations. And also, on top of that, because my company was in good financial condition going into this pandemic, the banks ignored me because I didn't owe them money. The first people to get money for PPP were ones who owed the banks money. Those who had money were just, our applications were lost.
Is that true?
I have heard this time and again from small businesses. It's like, I didn't get it because I didn't owe people money. Yeah, that's how it's decided, because the banks are like, we're going to give you that money because we need our money.
So just to briefly go back, and I know we've covered this a little bit already, but can you talk a little bit more about what state government restrictions or mandates are affecting your ability to run your business right now?
Well, I'd say it's a lack of state movement. The restrictions aren't so much, because I happen to agree with the distancing and the disinfectants and the masks and everything like that. So that's not limiting my business, because it's the pandemic that's limiting my business. So because we're now 100% remote, that's not a factor. What the factor is the inability for them to give me any kind of financial support to see me through this, or my landlord, so that my landlord could forgive our rent and we could keep our facility and then be able to reopen. There really is no measure in place to help secure small businesses. And since small businesses don't have the resources that large businesses have, after this year, we're going to see just a lot of large corporations and very few small businesses. And those small businesses that are actually do succeed are either in something that was just like well-placed for a pandemic, so a virtual type company. It's already virtual, like a game maker or something like that, versus the small businesses like mine that are in-person services. Going virtual, as great as the experiences that are, some of our clients will tell you, the clients who stuck around, it's not the same. And we still did lose over half of our clients, well over half of our clients. And we lost 2/3, maybe possibly more than 2/3 of our revenue for summer camp. Still had all the staff, by the way. Still had the same number of staff and paid them the same amount of money.
What's been the most frustrating part of this entire experience for you?
The most frustrating, well, I would say the most difficult for me was laying off my staff. I've never had a layoff. 20 years, I've never laid off an employee. And now I've done 2 rounds of it. I'm down to 3 employees. It's tearing down the castle that my daughter designed. Going through all of our assets and going, what are we going to pare down to keep so that we can open a bare bones facility? We just did our 3rd and last asset sale, where we sold off a lot of our costuming and our masks and our equipment. And I'm literally having to walk through the facility and go, this stays and this goes. And God, I remember that. I remember using that in an adventure, and we did this and that, and it made such a difference for these kids. And now I have to get rid of it. And it's rethinking the whole company based upon a much smaller model. Whereas before, we were reaching literally thousands of kids a year. And now I have like 80 members year-round, the monthly members. And then, we do online birthday parties and such, but it's not the same.
I know that a lot of people view owning a small business as almost an extension of themselves, and it requires you to be very giving of yourself. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to have to be so giving of yourself in your business?
It's kind of like being a parent. It's both the most rewarding and the most challenging thing that you can do. Any parent will tell you that your child has the ability to wound you unlike anybody else. And it's the same thing with a small business, because when you put your heart, soul, guts right out there as a business, and there's no loss of people who are there to tell you how to do it better. And the fact is they don't understand because they're not in your position. So they don't understand your limited resources. They don't understand what's going on in your own personal life. They don't understand all the difficulties you're trying to juggle. You're also told often by your employees how you could do it better. And on occasion, they're right. And so I try not to stifle that. But it's amazing to me how often I had employees tell me, you just need to be more transparent about your business, and tell us what's going on, like on the financial end, so that we can help out. But the fact is that it doesn't work like that. Any business, any organization has to have a leader. And the leader has a different viewpoint than everybody else in the business because they should be looking at all aspects. Whereas the people who are on the front line, if they're worried about what's happening on the bottom line, they're not going to be able to focus on their job, particularly working with creative people. Mm-hmm. They have to be able to focus on being creative. And that was really important to me and very difficult this summer. I had to come in with a mentality of, don't worry, we're keeping you employed. You're all right. We're going to get through this summer. Focus on being creative. Because the worst thing I could do is come in as a small business owner and say, oh my God, how the hell am I going to get through this season? And have them stressed out and now go, oh, and by the way, now you need to go start creating. It's like, because creativity mandates a sense of security. It's founded in that. So here I am as a small business. I'm fielding what I should do better from any number of people, what I'm doing or what I'm doing wrong. And then I've got the government telling me, oh, and you can't do this. And then I have my landlord over here saying, and give me this. And it's like, and I'm watching my bank going, by the way, you don't have enough in your savings account anymore. So we're going to close that out. And then the credit company's looking at that and they're going, oh, we're going to lower your credit because you don't have as many assets as you did before. So it's overwhelming and it's very difficult to be in this groundless space. Because when you started the business, you had a vision and you had something to shoot for. You said, okay, I'm going to do this and this, and I'm going to grow this way. And here's how we will meet our objectives. But right now, nobody knows where we are or where we're going. There's some politicians up there spewing some ideas, but really we're supposed to have a vaccine being readily available come December, and that's not going to happen. Schools are closing down as we speak because of pandemic, still, second surge coming out. So every small business right now that's not profiting off of this is sitting back going, I don't know what to do. I'm not getting any leadership from the government. My clients are just not interested in this different experience. And I'm just trying to stay afloat until I can see what's going to happen. So there truly is, and I keep coming back to this term over and over again, groundlessness. You're falling through space and you don't know where you are in space and when you're going to land and what that's going to look like. So that is a really tough place to be. I don't expect an economy that says this level of unemployment to be paying for summer camp. What I expect is that politicians will get off their ass and save the economy so that parents can get back to work, so that summer camp is the necessity. It is, by the way. For anybody who has a job, it's a necessity because that's their childcare. School is out. What are you going to do with your kids? You go to summer camp. So it's a necessity. Right now, it's not a necessity because of the situation of the economy. So it's really, it's not that complex. I'm a little perplexed by it because people think that it's, well, we can't afford to do that right now. Well, but do you understand that if you're not saving the summer camp industry now, you won't have a summer camp industry in 2021. It's an amazing industry, by the way. I have never seen an industry less competitive with each other. They are so much about mutual support. And they're all suffering right now. And they're all like, we don't know what to do. And we've got the industry trying to come together and go, let's forge something. And right now it's about politics. It's about lobbying and getting attention to what we're doing. But we are not a money-making machine. We're not a tech industry. Therefore, we don't have the massive amount of political clout that car manufacturers and airline industries and others have, because the money's not there. Ask any summer camp, we don't do it for the money. I mean, really, you don't work at an overnight camp 90 hours a week because you're making a lot of money.
My last question is, when we ask what can people do right now in order to help small businesses, what can people be doing right now in order to help your industry, to help summer camps?
To help summer camps is get on the phone and talk to your representatives, because we are trying to get a new measure passed that would set up a fund, a recurring revolving fund for summer camps, because we do think that this is not our last rodeo. This is going to happen again. So it would be a revolving fund for summer camps to rescue the industry, specifically in the state of Massachusetts, because the federal government isn't doing crap. So we're at a point where we're just focusing on the state. We're trying to get the state to help us push through a measure that puts a relatively low amount of money into a fund that would be immediately distributed to camps that would help us out. Because there's a lot of attention to schools, and there's a lot of attention to getting schools open so parents can go back to work. But there's none of that. Okay, and come June, what are we going to do? Because at least schools are publicly funded. Public schools are publicly funded. Summer camps are not. So what they need to do is they need to help out by getting on the horn. Just make your representatives understand this is a necessity at the state level. Because nothing's happening at the federal level right now.
Thank you for listening to Maintaining Sweat Equity. New episodes are available on the 1st and 15th of each month. Please be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, as well as our video version on YouTube. If you have a story to tell about your small business, email us at maintainingsweatequity@gmail.com. See you in the next episode.